Why did Silo 1 let Juliet live? That question has become a lot harder to answer after Season 3, Episode 7, because radio just showed us something we hadn't fully understood before. Whatever is controlling Silo 18 has ways of dealing with people outside the silo. Lukas and Patrick Kennedy leave Silo 18 wearing protective gear, and after they make radio contact, something attacks them. The voice then tells Camille that the threat has been neutralized, except Kennedy appears to survive. And that creates a massive problem for the Juliet story, because Juliet already did something far more dangerous. She walked out of Silo 18, she crossed the hill, she reached Silo 17, she survived there, and then she walked all the way back to Silo 18. So if Silo 1 really can monitor people outside and eliminate anyone it considers a threat, why was Juliet allowed to do any of that? There are a few possible answers. One of them fits what we've seen so far much better than the others. And it starts with what Silo 1 actually expected to happen when Juliet went outside. Remember the situation at the end of Season 1? Bernard had every reason to believe Juliet was going to die. Her suit was supposed to fail because of the tape. The entire cleaning system had been designed around that assumption. People went outside, saw the beautiful landscape displayed inside their helmet, cleaned the camera, and then died. Juliet was different because Walker and the people in Mechanical got the good heat tape onto her suit. That was the accident the system wasn't prepared for. Juliet survived the part of the process that was supposed to kill her, and that distinction mattered. The algorithm may have known Juliet was outside. That doesn't mean it knew she would survive. We saw the same assumption operating through Bernard. He watched Juliet go over the hill and had no reason to expect her to come back. The entire purpose of sending her out was based on a predictable outcome. Dead cleaner, camera cleaned, Silo remained stable. Then Juliet kept walking. That is where the problem begins. Because once she went over the hill, she entered territory where the rules became much less clear. And Season 3 has now given us evidence that the algorithm's knowledge isn't unlimited. That is one of the most important developments in the entire season. The voice has repeatedly presented itself to Camille as though it has a near-perfect understanding of what is happening inside Silo 18. It knows about people. It knows about conversations. It can influence decisions. It can apparently initiate safeguard procedures. But Episode 7 showed a very different situation outside. Lukas and Kennedy were attacked, yet Kennedy was able to communicate afterward. So either the system failed to kill them, or the information being given to Camille was incomplete. Both possibilities matter. Because if the algorithm can make mistakes about two people carrying radios outside Silo 17, then we shouldn't assume it had perfect information about Juliet hundreds of feet away from Silo 18. And there is another detail that may be even more important. Juliet wasn't carrying a radio when she made her original journey from Silo 18 to Silo 17. She was isolated. She couldn't communicate with anyone outside. She wasn't broadcasting her location. She was simply walking. Lukas and Kennedy had a radio. They were transmitting, and Episode 7 is called Radio. That title may be doing more work than simply describing the plot. We already know Silo 1 cares about communication between silos. Lukas learned enough about the system in Season 2 to understand that talking about certain things could trigger catastrophic consequences. The entire structure depends on keeping the silos isolated. So, if Silo 1 has a way to detect radio transmissions, that would explain why the events of Episode 7 look so different from Juliet's original journey. Juliet moved through the outside without telling anyone where she was. Lukas and Kennedy started transmitting. Then something came for them. That doesn't prove the radio theory, but the timing is hard to ignore, and it gives us a possible explanation for why Juliet was able to reach Silo 17 in the first place. Silo 17 was already dead, at least that is what Silo 1 believed. The system had no reason to expect a surviving population there. And from everything we've seen, Silo 17 had effectively disappeared from the normal network. So Juliet walking toward it may have looked like a problem that would solve itself. She was outside. She had limited protection. She was heading toward a silo believed to be dead. From an algorithm making decisions based on probability, the expected outcome would still be Juliet dying before she became someone else's problem. That sounds cold. But cold decision-making is exactly what the algorithm appears to do. It doesn't have to hate Juliet. It only has to calculate that killing her immediately isn't worth the cost. That distinction becomes even more important when you consider what happens after she reaches Silo 17. Juliet doesn't immediately contact Silo 18. She doesn't broadcast her survival. She doesn't announce that Silo 17 is inhabited. She disappears into a silo that Silo 1 already considers dead. And that gives the algorithm a reason to leave her alone, at least temporarily. From its perspective, Juliet surviving in Silo 17 may have looked like a contained problem, She had food limitations. She had no obvious way back. She was surrounded by the remains of a failed silo. And Silo 1 had no reason to assume she could cross the outside again. That last part is critical, because Juliet's return wasn't part of the original calculation. She had already broken one assumption by surviving. Then she broke another by reaching Silo 17. Then she broke a third by deciding to come home. And this is where I think the question changes. We keep asking, why didn't Silo 1 kill Juliet? But maybe the better question is, at what point did Silo 1 realize Juliet was still alive? Those aren't the same question. If the system didn't immediately know that Juliet had survived the journey, then there may have been a delay between her going outside and becoming an active threat. And that delay could explain almost everything, because Juliet didn't just survive the cleaning, she disappeared. She went somewhere the system thought was dead, and then, eventually, she showed up again. That is a very different situation from what happened with Lukas and Kennedy. They deliberately left Silo 18 for a mission. They had a specific destination. They were carrying a radio. They were trying to communicate. The system had time to react. Juliet's first journey was completely different. She was supposed to die. Then she vanished. Then she appeared at another silo. And by the time Silo 1 understood what had happened, Juliet was already inside Silo 17. There is another possibility here though, and this one gets even more interesting. What if Silo 1 didn't consider Juliet's survival an immediate threat? That sounds strange because we know how dangerous she became. But look at what Juliet actually knew when she returned. She knew Silo 17 existed. She knew there were survivors. She knew the outside wasn't safe. She had seen evidence that the silos were connected, but she didn't yet know the full safeguard system. She didn't know exactly how Silo 1 operated. She didn't know where the poison entered Silo 18, and she didn't know how to stop it. That information only became important much later. In Season 3, Juliet's entire objective is now focused on finding the safeguard pipe and stopping the poison. That is the information the system has a reason to fear. So perhaps the algorithm didn't need to kill Juliet when she returned. It needed to control her. And that is exactly what Season 3 has shown us. Camille was instructed to keep Juliet on memory-suppressing medication. Juliet's memories were being managed. Her knowledge was being limited. The algorithm wasn't treating her like an enemy who needed to be shot on sight. It was treating her like a problem that could still be managed. That is a very different strategy. And it may tell us something important about how Silo 1 thinks. The algorithm may not be trying to eliminate every person who discovers the truth. It may be trying to prevent certain information from spreading. That would explain why Juliet has repeatedly been allowed to survive when other people were killed. Juliet is dangerous because she asks questions. She becomes catastrophic when those questions turn into actionable knowledge. Season 1, Juliet knew something was wrong with the cleaning. Season 2, Juliet learned that other silos existed. Season 3, Juliet is getting closer to understanding Safeguard itself. Notice how the response changes. When Juliet first becomes a problem, the system tries to make her disappear. When she survives, it tries to contain her. When she returns, it uses Camille to manipulate her memory. And now that Juliet is actively trying to stop Safeguard, the pressure against her is getting much more direct. That progression makes sense if the algorithm is making decisions based on the level of threat rather than simply executing everyone who breaks the rules. And that brings us back to episode 7, because Lukas and Kennedy may have accidentally exposed a limitation in that system. The voice tells Camille they have been neutralized, but Kennedy's voice comes back over the radio. That means either the attack failed or the voice is deliberately lying. If it is lying, we have a much bigger mystery. Why? If it failed, we have an equally important mystery. How powerful is Silo 1 actually? For most of the series, we've been encouraged to imagine Silo 1 as almost omniscient. Now we're seeing cracks in that assumption. It may have surveillance. It may have weapons. It may have control over Safeguard. It may be able to monitor communications, but those abilities could have limits. Maybe the system needs a signal. Maybe it needs a known location. Maybe certain weapons have limited range. Maybe it can only intervene under specific conditions. Or maybe it has to prepare an attack before someone goes outside. We don't know yet. And that uncertainty is exactly why Juliet's survival matters. Because if Silo 1 had unlimited control over the surface, her story becomes very difficult to explain. They could have killed her before she reached Silo 17. They could have killed her when she left Silo 17. They could have killed her when she approached Silo 18. They didn't. So either the system didn't know where she was, or decided that killing her wasn't the best move. The third option is especially interesting. because the algorithm may have calculated that Juliet returning to Silo 18 was useful. Think about what happened when Juliet came back. Her survival became visible to everyone. The people of Silo 18 saw that she was alive. The rebellion gained a symbol. But at the same time, Juliet's return created chaos that the algorithm could exploit. The rebellion had already pushed Silo 18 toward collapse. Memory suppression could then be introduced as a way to stabilize the population. Camille could be positioned as the person responsible for maintaining order. Juliet could be isolated. Her memories could be suppressed, and the system could continue operating. That doesn't mean the algorithm wanted Juliet to return. We don't have enough evidence for that. But it does suggest something more interesting than a simple plot hole. The algorithm may be optimizing outcomes rather than following a single rule. If Juliet dies outside, that's one outcome. If Juliet survives and causes a rebellion, that's another. If Juliet survives but can be controlled, that's potentially a better outcome. And the algorithm seems to prefer controlled outcomes. That also explains why it uses people. Bernard, Camille, Robber. Different people, different circumstances, but the same basic principle. The system rarely needs to walk into the room itself. It gives someone a decision. Then it lets that person make the choice. That makes the voice much more dangerous than a simple execution system. It can manipulate the people who believe they are protecting the silo. And that may be exactly what happened with Juliet. The system assumed the cleaning would kill her. It didn't. The system assumed Silo 17 was effectively irrelevant. Juliet found survivors. The system assumed her journey was over. She came back. And now Juliet is standing much closer to the truth than she has ever been. There is one more detail from episode 7 that I think deserves attention. The algorithm seemed extremely confident when it told Camille that Lukas and Kennedy had been neutralized. That confidence may be intentional. If Kennedy really survived, then the voice has just demonstrated that its statements aren't necessarily factual reports. They may be instructions or manipulation. And if that's true, then we have to reconsider every time the voice claims to know something. Maybe it knows, maybe it predicts, maybe it has incomplete information and presents its predictions as certainty because Camille needs to believe it. That would make the algorithm much more believable as an AI system. A machine can be incredibly powerful and still make bad assumptions when its information is incomplete. Juliet's entire story has been built around one of those assumptions. She was supposed to die. She didn't. And the system may have spent the rest of the story trying to correct for that mistake. So why did Silo 1 let Juliet live? The strongest answer right now is that it probably didn't deliberately let her live in the way we're imagining. It expected the cleaning system to kill her. Her good tape broke that expectation. Once she survived, Silo 17 gave her somewhere to disappear. And once she returned, the algorithm shifted from physical elimination to containment. That explanation fits what we've seen far better than the idea that Silo 1 simply forgot about her. But episode 7 adds a new possibility. The thing that makes someone detectable outside may be communication. Juliet traveled alone. Lukas and Kennedy carried a radio. They transmitted. Then, the attack came. We don't have confirmation that the radio caused it. The show hasn't given us that answer yet. But if the next episodes reveal that Silo 1 can locate people through their transmissions, then Juliet's original journey suddenly makes much more sense. She wasn't invisible. She was simply silent. And that would make the title Radio a pretty important clue, because the real danger outside may not be walking between the silos. It may be telling Silo 1 where you are. And if that's true, Juliet's greatest advantage all along may have been the same thing that made her journey so terrifying. She went completely off the network. No radio, no help, no signal. Just Juliet walking across the dead world toward a silo everyone believed was empty. And Silo 1 may have lost track of her long enough for her to become the one person it really didn't know how to deal with. Now, the bigger question isn't whether the algorithm can kill Juliet. Episode 7 suggests that it can probably try. The bigger question is whether it can actually see her everywhere. Because if there are blind spots in Silo 1's surveillance, Juliet doesn't need to defeat the algorithm head on. She just needs to find another place where it can't see what she's doing.